So this idea of being nonviolent while at the same time being present for justice is, I think, a Buddhist ideal. I won't say it's the Buddhist ideal, but it is what the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King learned from his conversations with Thich Nhat Hanh.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. My name is Reverend Seth Stearns. I'm the Minister of Spiritual Life and Learning here at First Community. And our conversation today is with Lama Kathy Wesley, who is the resident teacher at KTC Buddhist Center here in Columbus, Ohio. And I wanted to share some background about how this conversation came to be. Lama Kathy was kind enough to host a group of us out at the KTC, a group of folks who do contemplative experiences on a monthly basis, different types of experiences. And Kathy was kind enough to host us. And during the course of being out there, she and I engaged in a conversation around social activism, social justice. What does that look like from a Buddhist perspective? And it was a fascinating conversation, and I was looking forward to continuing that conversation and being able to share it all with you. So, Kathy, thank you. Thank you for taking time and having this conversation.
Yeah, I appreciate you inviting me. It's great to chat.
Wonderful. In terms of your introduction, is there anything else you'd like to add to your introduction about
No, it sounds.
who you are?
I'm ready to hear it. I'm ready to hear a podcast. So, yeah.
Okay, wonderful. And maybe just a little bit of background first on KTC, just to let people know what KTC is. And then what I'd like, before we talk about social justice, social action from a Buddhist perspective, maybe a quick grounding, if that's possible, in Buddhist precepts and what are some foundational elements of Buddhism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, thanks again. Just thanks again for inviting me to be on the podcast. It's always fun to talk Dharma, which is what the Buddha called his teachings, Dharma or truth. It's always great to talk about Dharma, no matter whose Dharma it is. So, yes, I can tell you a little bit about, I think, Buddhism in general, and then Columbus KTC. The Buddhism in general is 2,600 years old, and it goes back to ancient India, which is where a young prince, Siddhartha, was born to the king and queen of a northern Indian city-state. And when he was young, he was destined to be king. So his father asked for a fortune teller to tell his fortune. And like, what kind of king will he be? And the fortune teller sort of upset the father by saying, look, here's what I saw. If he is protected and sheltered from all of the world's sufferings, he's going to be a great king. But if he is exposed to the sufferings of the world, he's going to run away from home and become a wandering holy man. Mm-hmm. And so the king, of course, not wanting his son to take this career path, he actually sheltered him. They had a very big palace compound. They kept him busy. He learned all the warrior arts. He learned everything, history, science. He learned everything that he could possibly learn. And when he was very young, as a teenager, he was betrothed and he was wed. And so then after that, he and his wife had a small son. Now his responsibilities to the king were done because he had produced an heir. And so he became restive and started wondering if maybe there was more to life than life in the palace. I mean, as a teenager, you can be incredibly distracted by all of the joys and pleasures of royal life. But once you get to a certain age, it's like you want to know what else there is in the world. And so he asked his father to go visit the kingdom, and the father said no. And he said, "No, come on. How can I govern a group of people I've never met? That this is just me colloquially talking. So the king said, "Yes, you can go." And so he sent him off with a chaperone. And believe it or not, yes, all the things that he was not supposed to see, he saw on this trip. Prince Siddhartha saw sickness, he saw aging, he saw death, he saw all of those things. And each time he asked his charioteer, "Well, what about this?" And he said, "Well, haven't you seen any of this in your life, my lord?" And the answer was no, because all of those things had been carefully hidden from him by his family. So, but he was just, he was, how should we say this? He was touched to the core by the suffering of his people. And somehow he knew that even if he were to open up the treasury and spend all of his money and give all of his money away, he would not assuage old age, sickness, and death. So as this now depressed young man is being accompanied back to his palace, he saw a person sitting and meditating under a tree, and he said to the charioteer, "Well, what's that man doing?" And he said, "My lord, he's attempting to go beyond the sufferings of the world through meditation." So the little light bulb moment happens for Prince Siddhartha, and in the dead of night, he leaves his wife and son, the heir to the throne, with their family at the palace, and he leaves, goes over the fence, and becomes, yes, a wandering holy man, which he does for 6 years. He practices every spiritual discipline that's out there in an attempt to go beyond the sufferings of the world. And so after 6 long years of this kind of practice, he settled on one specific kind of practice, asceticism. He didn't eat much. He didn't drink much water. He meditated day and night. And believe it or not, he had very deep meditation, but he still didn't come to the answer he was looking for, which is, what is suffering? What is the cause of suffering? What's the solution? And he made the decision. He had actually gathered a group of 5 disciples around him who had said, "This guy is the best ascetic I have ever seen." So he was a great prince, and then he became a great ascetic. But in neither role was he ever able to solve the question of why is there suffering. So he decides to get up and walk away. He gets up, he walks away, and his followers are like, "What?" And he goes and gets something to eat. A woman gives him a bowl of milk and rice, and he takes this and eats this, and then his mind is refreshed, and instead of sitting on the sunny riverbank, he gets some soft grass and sits under the shade of a tree. So he's moderated his ascetic practice. And some people say it's in 24 hours, some people say it's in several days. Whatever is said, he has an interior spiritual illumination. And this interior spiritual illumination gives him the answer that he was seeking. And after that, he's asked to teach. And when he starts to teach, he teaches what are known as the 4 truths known by the noble. Suffering is part of life. You can run, but you can't hide. Suffering is part of life, so we need to accept that fact. First, that's the first truth. Suffering's part of life. Second, suffering has a cause. Now, you and me, we tend to think that the cause of suffering is out there somewhere. It's the boss, or it's the family, or it's the government, it's the man, whatever. But actually, Prince Siddhartha, when he became known as the awakened one, or the Buddha, gave the teaching that suffering is part of life, but the cause of suffering is actually clinging and fixation. Now, we all know this from our own lives. We cling to people, we cling to things, we cling to ideas. You hear the talking heads on the radio and see them on TV. People are clinging to everything. And it is this clinging that causes the suffering. So you would think that the third noble truth would be the solution of suffering, and you would be right. Because if suffering has a cause, of course it has a solution. And if the cause is fixation and clinging, The solution is letting go. Now, you cannot say to a person who is suffering, I just let that go. You have to give them a method. And that's why the fourth truth, known by the Noble, after the truth of suffering, the truth of the cause of suffering, the truth of the solution to suffering, is the truth of the path that leads to the end of suffering. And the Buddha, when he taught this, he taught what are known as the Eightfold Noble Path and that sort of thing. But it really boiled down to 4 statements that he made. Do no harm whatsoever. Practice virtue as much as you can. And tame your mind. The 4th statement is, this is the teaching of the Buddha. So you need look no further. In other words, he only taught 3 things. Do no harm whatsoever. Don't harm yourself, don't harm others. Practice virtue as much as possible. Take care of yourself and benefit others. And tame your mind, which means to practice mindfulness and meditation so that you are aware of what is going on in your mind and can make the changes necessary to bring peace to yourself and to others. And that's it. And he taught this far and wide in northern India, gathered hundreds of followers. In fact, we're recording this on the celebration, during the 15-day celebration of his miracles. The Buddha performed a miracle every day for 15 days in order to win a philosophical and religious debate with non-Buddhist scholars who were hoping they could defeat him so that they could claim all of his followers. But it didn't work out because of the miracles thing. Mm-hmm. Anyhow, so this special time that we're doing this talk, this chat in, it's really special because it goes back to the life of the Buddha. These 4 things that the Buddha taught: do no harm, practice virtue, tame your mind. That's it. And all of the teachings of the Buddha that came after that, the dozens and dozens of sutras or scriptures, his Vinaya or monastic discipline, his Abhidharma texts that cover Buddhist cosmology, even so far as the Mahayana Sutras, which appeared not at the time of the Buddha's death, but hundreds of years later. All of these teach these same 4 activities, and this is what Buddhists do. Now, everyone, of course, asked the Buddha, which of the Hindu gods are you? You know, which one? Which Hindu god are you? And he denied being a god, denied it. And then they said, well, if you're not a god, are you like an ordinary person? And he said, I'm a human being who has accomplished enlightenment. So that put him right in the middle between the ordinary and the divine. So you sometimes could call the Buddha the teacher of the middle way. Away from the extremes of eternalism and nihilism, away from the extremes, you get the whole idea. And so Buddhism practices a non-theistic religion. Since the Buddha denied divinity, what this means is that the Buddha and all of those who attain awakening are saints of the highest order for us. They are worthy of veneration. And by venerating them, which we do through the statuary that we see in Buddhist shrines, the artwork that we see on the walls of Buddhist temples, through these reminders, we remember that we have the potential inside of us to become a Buddha as well, because that was the Buddha's other major teaching, was that all beings have a mind, and that mind can know itself and know itself completely and become awakened. So that is the short story of the basics of Buddhist teaching, the life of the Buddha, the 4 Noble Truths, and one more thing, that is that after the Buddha passed away, Buddhism spread throughout the countries of Asia. And the particular branch that I was introduced to when I was 23, when I met a Buddhist monk, oddly in Newark, Ohio, but we're just not necessarily going to do that story today. But I met a Buddhist monk in 1977 in Newark, Ohio, and I became a Tibetan Buddhist because I met a Tibetan Buddhist monk. But that's because Buddhism spread all throughout Asia. And then, after the Tibetan diaspora of 1959, when the communist government in Beijing invaded the country to put down an anti-communist rebellion. At that time, many spiritual Tibetans, including His Holiness the Dalai Lama, fled Tibet. And then in the 1960s, the very first Tibetans came to the United States when the Dalai Lama's brother accepted a teaching position at Indiana University, where he remained and was an emeritus until his passing a few years ago. So Buddhism has gone around the world and gone to other countries. And in the 1960s, the Tibetan form of Buddhism came to the United States. The very first Buddhist texts published in the United States were published by Henry David Thoreau and his buddies in the Transcendentalist movement. The Lotus Sutra, a Mahayana sutra, was the very first sutra published in the United States. It was somewhere around 1847, give or take. And then waves of Buddhist immigration happened when the railroads were being built in California, and Chinese and other Asian workers came to the United States to help build the railroads. They brought their Buddhism with them. Pure Land Buddhism, Zen Buddhism when the Japanese immigrated. And there have been waves of interest in Buddhism from the Transcendentalist literary movement of the East Coast in the United States in the 1800s, to the 1920s interest in Japanese Zen, the 1950s beat poets and the interest in Japanese Zen, and then the 1960s and 70s the Tibetans and other groups coming to the U.S. So our center was founded in 1977 by this Tibetan Buddhist monk whose name was Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche. Khenpo means he's an abbot, like a monastery abbot. Karthar is his personal name. And Rinpoche means that he's a precious teacher and has been acknowledged as that by the leadership of his group of his school of Buddhism. So he remained in the United States from 1976 until his passing in 2019 at the age of about 95. And he continued to teach all of that time, and he came to Columbus time after time after time until his passing in 2019. So that's a little bit about how Tibetan Buddhism went through the world and how it came to the U.S. and why you've got a Tibetan Buddhist Lama or priest in front of you.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So is it a misnomer to call Buddhism a religion?
I'll tell you what. Some people say, because I hear this a lot, some people say Buddhism is not a religion, it's a philosophy. And I hear people say, Buddhism is not a religion, it's a way of life. I've heard people say Buddhism is not a religion, it's a psychology. But kind of my opinion is if it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, and then there's incense and shrines, it's a duck. And so it's a religion. If it looks like a religion, if the incense makes it smell like a religion, and so forth and so on, it's a big enough tent to include all of these ideas.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you.
It depends on what you need as an individual.
And I just wanted to be sure through the course of this conversation that if I reference Buddhism as a religion, then I'm not doing anything out of bounds or
not for me anyway.
Okay.
I mean, you'll get arguments from some people, I am sure, but then you'll get arguments from people about just about anything.
So let's go ahead and pivot then and thank you for actually a wonderful framework of Buddhism. So let's pivot then to this idea of social justice and social action. It's obviously it's an important topic right now, and I know at some point either soon or later in our conversation we'll talk about the peace walk on the part of the monks and where that fits into this notion of social action. But so I'll start off on a high level from a Buddhist perspective, from a Tibetan Buddhist perspective. I'll be even more specific. What is expected? What when it comes to social justice and social action? What's expected? What is acceptable?
hmm here's my take. I am just one Tibetan Buddhist, so I don't get to talk for Tibetan Buddhism as a whole.
Hmm.
And in fact, I don't get to talk in reference to Buddhism at all as a whole. So this is just one Buddhist talking to you about this. When I think about the history of Buddhism and social action, we go all the way back to the 1960s and the Vietnam War, when the Zen master, the Vietnamese Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh, was part of a movement for peace, and he in fact he began to teach peace as through his book, Peace is Every Step, because of the Zen Buddhist tradition of walking meditation and so forth and so on. So the idea is that it was his opinion that peace could be brought into the lives of people one step at a time into their daily lives, not just if they were go to church Buddhists. The idea that you could actually live peace as a daily routine through the practice of mindfulness and nonviolence. And so he had a
Was it,
really
if I can
yeah.
interrupt you, so and it's if I remember correctly, Thich Nhat Hanh was started something called engaged Buddhism, I think
That's
was
correct.
the term.
Yeah, that's
So
right.
was that a break? Was that something new
Oh, I
as
wish
it
I could.
relates to?
Yeah, I wish I could tell you, because I am not a student of this genre of
Hmm,
literature. I know of it like many other people, but what I can say about it, I might be able to go into that, answer that question from a side direction.
okay.
Let's look at what happened. He had conversations with other activists, and there was a person who admired his work in the United States, and that was the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
Hmm,
He was an admirer of Thich Nhat Hanh's Buddhist work for peace and his nonviolent approach. And they had discussions and conversations. And in fact, one of the most well-known quotations of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is, "Hate does not dispel hate. Only love does that."
hmm,
Well, what's interesting is that quotation is taken from the first chapter of the Buddha's Book of Sayings, the Dhammapada, or the Dharma Path, which was spoken by the historical Buddha Shakyamuni and quoted ever since then by Buddhists worldwide. The exact quote from the Buddha is, "Hate never once dispelled hate. Only love dispels hate. This is the law," or the Dharma, "this is the law, ancient and inexhaustible." And then he says, "You too shall pass away. And knowing this, how can you quarrel?" So this idea of being nonviolent while at the same time being present for justice is, I think, a Buddhist ideal. I won't say it's the Buddhist ideal, but it is what the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King learned from his conversations with Thich Nhat Hanh.
hmm,
And so in the 1950s and the 1960s, a group of Japanese Buddhist monks from the Nipponzan order of Mahayana Buddhism were walking across the United States with small drums, just, beating a cadence for their walk. And they were walking for peace. And their interest was in encouraging people to ban the use of nuclear weapons, which had wreaked so much destruction at the end of World War II in Japan and caused such fear in people's hearts and minds that this order of Japanese monks started crisscrossing the United States. I even met a group of them. I mean, it was really, really interesting to see and read about them going across the country. So the idea of being active for social justice is inside Buddhism. And even the teacher who is the head of our Buddhist, Tibetan Buddhist tradition, the Karma Kagyu Tibetan Buddhist tradition, a tradition was asked, can a person be socially active, active for social action and social justice? And he said, well, it depends. It depends on whether you can do this while maintaining your spiritual equilibrium, which takes us back to the four teachings, the three teachings of the Buddha: do no harm, practice virtue, and tame your mind. So if a person undertakes social action, and undertaking that social action increases their mental afflictions, if it makes them more aggressive or makes them act out their aggression through the disguise of social activity and social justice, then they are doing a disservice to all of those who see their action, as well as to themselves and their own heart. Because we know this can happen, where people are passionate about a cause, but they lose sight of their moral compass and enact anger and violence in the things they say and the things they do. And so we have to recognize that it's not without cost, that protest is not without cost to the individual. And so that was what the Karmapa, the head of our tradition, said was the dividing line, was you can be socially active if it doesn't throw you off spiritually. So I even had a friend of mine who said, well, I got to be honest. She said, I can't go to a protest and hold up a nasty sign with bad words on it. She said, I just can't do it. It's because she remembered this little commentary called The 37 Practices of a Bodhisattva. And number 34 of these 37 practices is, because harsh words disturb the minds of others and cause the bodhisattva, the person whose mind is on the path of goodness, causes that person's conduct to deteriorate. Abandoning harsh speech, which is unpleasant to others, is the bodhisattva's practice. And this doesn't mean you don't tell the truth, that you don't speak truth to power. It means you have to use words that are attractive words, that are positive and powerful words, and not words that seek to wound or injure another person. So it's like, that's my first take.
So let's get even more concrete and specific with that, if we could.
Yeah.
So give us some imagery of what does social action, social justice look like that is still in line and adhering to Buddhist principles, and what does it look like when it doesn't?
Well, I can't tell you what it looks like when it doesn't, because I have to be honest with you. I have not seen anybody do like any of the people in my congregation. I'm sure they have all attended demonstrations, but I haven't witnessed what they do and what they say. So I can't tell you how they get it wrong. But if I see ordinary everyday people at protests and they use harsh language and attack other people and call them names and so forth and so on, that isn't the way to go. In fact, of the story that I interrupted myself for was about my friend who wanted to go to a protest, and she didn't know what to do because she knew that harsh speech was not going to do it, because her friend said, write bad words and attack somebody on a sign. And she's like, nah, I'm not going to do that. So what she did was she printed a Buddhist prayer on hers. And the prayer that she printed on her sign, which had to be pretty good size to fit the whole prayer on it, it's called the Four Immeasurables. May all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they have I'm sorry, may they be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. So that's the first two. May they have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. Third, may they have that great happiness, which is total freedom from suffering. Then the fourth, may they dwell in great equanimity, free of attachment and aversion to those near and far. And that was on her giant sign.
Mm.
That was what she stood for, was may this happen. So it's like,
That won't get very many clicks, you know. That
yeah,
won't
no,
attract a lot of clicks.
although
Mm.
I would say that the monks' walk for peace
Mm.
attracted a different sort of socially active individual.
Mm.
And
Say more about that.
I can't say that I saw any nasty language and any
Mm.
attacking speech happen among the crowds. Now, I only saw a select group of photographs from their walk, but that walk was 2,000, more than 2,000 miles from their home monastery in Fort Worth, Texas, to Washington, D.C. It was 2,000 plus miles that they walked on foot through rain, heat, wind, and snow
Mm.
to reach
Barefoot.
Washington,
And
where,
some of them barefoot.
yeah, some of them barefoot. And they went there and they said they wanted people to know there was another way.
Mm.
And that
Mm.
other way was personal peace.
Mm.
So that was, so I can't say that I saw any nasty signs among the people who lined the roads watching the monks go by. Can't
Mm.
say I did.
Mm. So if folks, I imagine you'll hear this from folks who are caught up in all the anger and vitriol and
Yeah.
all the negative energy.
Mhm.
What counsel do you offer?
Yeah. You know what I say to people about anger is that it's like any other investment of your personal time and energy. It's like any other investment. Investing in maintaining anger, it costs.
Mm.
It costs the individual. Because, yes, here's my take. My take is that human beings are hardwired for justice. In fact, primates and possibly other animals are hardwired for justice. The famous study of the two groups of monkeys that were paid for a task, that were asked to do a task and one was paid and the other wasn't. These two groups of monkeys were aware of each other and could see each other, and they were both performing some kind of task. One of them got grapes as a result, and the other got none. Well, the ones that were getting no grapes had a sit-down strike and refused to work until they got paid too.
Mm.
So we're hardwired for justice. But the problem is we are not taking good care of our mind. Our mind, from the Buddhist point of view, is like our most precious child. People love their children and sacrifice everything for them, but they sometimes forget that they themselves are a child who needs care and needs to be protected and nurtured. So a person who becomes angry sometimes will make a mistake about that anger. They'll make a mistake. This was what one of my teachers told me. Trungpa Rinpoche said this. He said, we make a mistake about anger. We think it's our friend. We think it makes us strong. We think it makes us courageous. We think it makes us correct. But it does none of those things. He said, anger, when it takes a person over, makes them stupid. It makes them make mistakes. And it causes them personal harm. And of course, now we're knowing, because of brain studies and physiological studies that talk about the impact of the hormone cortisol, which is released in the body during a burst of anger, that's actually poison to the human system. And it can actually lead to diabetes, obesity, and sickness. And so if people feed themselves a regular diet of rage, what's happening is that they themselves are getting smaller. Their minds are getting smaller and tighter and tighter. And they are not able to see things with a global view that would allow them to make good decisions and help them to find solutions to problems. Because we can't think creatively when we're like narrowly focused like this. So from my point of view, the reason that Thich Nhat Hanh's statement, hate never once dispelled hate, only love dispels hate. This is the law, right? This is the, the way of the world. It resonates with people just like the walking monks wish for everyone to wake up in the morning and say, today will be my peaceful day. It means that anger may alert you to an injustice, but artificially nurturing that hatred or anger and trying to increase that anger and make it bigger and bigger and bigger is not going to help you solve it. That's my view. Mm-hmm. You can damage a lot, but you can't build with it.
Mm.
So
I'm going to make the assumption then that is your counsel to some of your folks there? Well, I won't presuppose. What is your counsel to some of your folks when it comes to social media, when it comes to some of those sources of outrage?
Mm-hmm. I have an interesting example from my life, and that is that I correspond with an older man who went to India in the 1970s when he was just in his 20s. And I guess you could say he fell in with the Buddhists and has been a Buddhist ever since. And he's now almost 80 years old. And he shared some videos with me on our Facebook chat. And they were totally made by AI. And they were created to make people angry.
Mm.
They showed fictional people doing fictional violence to fictional people.
Mm.
And it was very easy to detect that this was that. And I had to teach this man what the word rage bait meant. It was Oxford Dictionary's word of the year last year. So it's like I said, here it is. And you have to understand that watching this over and over again is not helping you. And he appreciated the information. And then that's when I told him about the walking monks. And then his whole attitude changed. He was very happy then, because it's like, now something for hope. And so I tell my people that it's fine to go to protests, and it's fine to be present and voice your interest. But please watch your mind. Please watch it, because your mind is your most precious child. And if you don't watch out for it, it's going to be hard for you. So if you can do this while also nurturing and taking care of, your most precious mind, then you can do any of these things. You can protest, you can be present, and so on. So it's like that. Because what is it doing to us? That's the point.
Mm.
What are we becoming? Because what the Buddha also said in that first chapter of his saying, he said, we are what we think. We are what we think. All that we are arises with our thoughts, and with our thoughts, we make the world. And if we think, speak, and act with a selfish mind, an impure selfish mind, me, I, then suffering follows that. Just as surely as the wheel follows the ox that draws your cart. And if you think, speak, and act with a pure, selfless mind, happiness will follow you like a shadow that can't be shaken. So those are the preamble verses to the one that the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. quoted. Hate never once dispelled hate. So it's really kind of amazing. So I'm going to have
So,
to do some study about Thich Nhat Hanh to find out exactly how he marshaled his work in Vietnam. So thank you.
well, and I was just going to kind of head down this path. So, what you're offering can some folks might hear that as being aspirational.
Mm-hmm.
Are
Yeah.
there um, some practices that you can offer,
Yep.
even for
Yep.
you and I called them hobbyists,
Yeah.
Buddhist hobbyists,
Oh,
or
sure.
lay folks? Are there some practices that you could offer that
Mm-hmm.
when we find ourselves really getting in that negative cycle and that
Yeah.
negative spin
Mhm.
that can help to bring us out of that?
Yeah. I'm going to go sideways for a second, but then I'll come back to your question. I'll sort of answer your question first by talking about the Venerable Panyakara, the leader of the monks who did the peace walk. He encouraged the people who were listening to him to become aware of their attachments, the things that they're attached to. And this will make you laugh for a second because it is rather comical. He said, we all have problems with attachment. He said, and this you can see. He's given this talk many times. He said, we all have problems with attachments, and they make us do things that aren't right. You know, we all have problems with our attachment. And he said, if we have a lover, we always want to be with that lover. And by that, I mean our cell phones. And he said, so my advice to all of you is to, in the morning when you awaken, use it for meditation and prayer time. Don't pick your lover up just yet. Put your lover down before you have your morning prayers and meditation. And then in the 1 hour before you go to sleep at night, please put your lover down and don't scroll through social media before you go to sleep. Leave that time for reflection on the day. So I would tell anybody to follow that advice to begin with. And the second piece of advice I would give to people would be when they begin to feel as though they are becoming taken over by anger or hatred for something, that they should probably disengage from the media that's upsetting them for just a moment and breathe and just be present with their breath and breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out, maybe 4 times, 5 times. And then don't pick it up again because you've already had your moment. So that's one way to approach it. Another way is to practice loving kindness before you are in a tight, tense situation. So, His Holiness the Dalai Lama suggested that every day a person sits quietly and mentally sends love out. They imagine that they're sending their love and kindness out first to themselves and to all those who are in their family and their near and dear ones. Next, to people who are in the vicinity who they do not know. And then at last to all beings everywhere, including those they may not like. And that by breathing out and sending, and you imagine as you breathe out that you send your love to all beings. And you just do this for maybe 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. You can use your phone for that. Just breathe out, and think as you breathe out that you're giving goodness and happiness to all beings. And then when you get up from your seat, try to maintain that idea and recognize that everyone that you see is really just like you. They're just like you. They want to be happy, but they don't know how. They don't know how. And because they don't know how, they're going to bump into things over and over and over again and make mistakes over and over and over again as they try to seek happiness. And see that, and when you see it, wish them love and compassion. In fact, there's a friend of mine who is a Buddhist, and she has gone to protests against the immigration enforcement actions where people have been swept up on the streets and things like that. And she said, I have a hard time going to these. She said, because I tend to, in my mind, still feel hate and anger toward the people who are doing these violent things. And I said, well, do you remember the medicine Buddha? And this is from one of the Buddha's Mahayana Sutras, where he talked about the promises made by an enlightened being known as the Buddha of medicine. And these Buddhas and Bodhisattvas can be depicted in any color or shade. Like, for example, the picture over here is Tara, the feminine aspect of compassion, but she's seen in many, many different colors, and this one is the white one. But there is also a green one and a red one and so forth. So the medicine Buddha is blue because there's a healing stone, a stone that's associated with healing called lapis lazuli. And I said, so then would you try this? I said, because you've practiced medicine Buddha meditation, meditating on his form and saying his mantra and so forth. I said, why don't you imagine that in the heart of every single enforcement agent is a medicine Buddha, and then that medicine Buddha is giving out light that then blesses that person. And so that's, she said that helped her a lot. She said, even as I'm watching the news, I'm visualizing the medicine Buddha in the heart of all the people who I have a problem with.
Mm.
Yeah. And in fact, my own teacher was asked, well, how do we pray for political figures we dislike? I'm not going to be able to lay my hands on it right away, I bet you. Now, I may not be able to, but he actually spoke a prayer. He spoke a prayer, and he said, may this person whom I'm praying for, this person who I am opposed to, may this person quickly be free of suffering, and may they meet genuine spiritual friends. May they pursue a spiritual path, and may they become fully and completely enlightened and free from pain and suffering forever. It's like that. I'm not going to be able to find the exact words, unfortunately, because I have a picture of this prayer on my phone, and I've shared it with lots of people. But that's how he, as a Buddhist, wanted to pray for people who he would have a problem with.
Mm. As you're speaking, it strikes me that what you're suggesting takes a high degree of intentionality,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to allowing ourselves to be swept up in the
Mm-hmm.
emotions and the rage and the all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
So I love some of the exercises and the practices that you've shared, and that I think are one doesn't have to study Buddhism for years and years and years to be able
Right.
to incorporate those.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I feel like we're worth it. Okay, just we're worth it. Our our most precious mind, our most precious child is worth caring for. And if we can take care of ourselves, then the world we create after the one that we've found fault in here, the world that we then create will be a different world. Humans will always have failings and problems, and there will always be violent ones who seek to use their violence to harm other people. But we have to keep our own heart and mind as clear as we possibly can so that we can build something that is lasting within ourselves. So that's my hope is, and this is why the Dalai Lama and others recommend doing this, extending imaginary love to people. He says, do it every day, extending this love every day, because he said, you will find, he said, that it will begin to change how you look at people. He said, the person who serves you coffee at the restaurant, the person who is getting on the bus with you, all of these people, they're part of your world, and you can actually be kind to them for no reason. And that's going to be something that they're going to experience and notice. And that's how peace gets built, person by person by person. And it gets built by putting down the sources of entertainment and rage bait and putting that stuff down because it's addictive and dangerous. You put it down, and instead you take up the caring for yourself and for others. I think it's a vibe.
Mhm. Mm.
I think it's a thing that we can actually nurture and have grow in our own heart. So
Mm.
we can try.
I love the contrast and the juxtaposition of sort of that energy that can be generated as we think about social justice and doing things
Oh, sure.
on the other side, not on the other side, but as a alternative conduit, as an alternative way of doing that
Hmm.
is the striving for compassion,
Hmm. Oh,
compassion
yeah.
versus outrage.
Hmm. Exactly, exactly. Because I remember they interviewed these monks, the chief monk, this Venerable Panyakara, and he said,
The
what,
walking
the
monks.
walking monk, right? Yeah. And they said, well, what struck you about people? And he said, their sincerity. He said, they sincerely want peace. They
Mm,
sincerely want it. And they come because they feel something when they're here with us. They
mm,
feel they feel that it's a step for them toward peace. And so I feel like he said that it really, he said, was so interesting. He said because some people had came to the walk and to witness them and said, I was about to give up hope. They said,
mm,
I was about to give up hope, but you showed us that there's another way to do it. There's another
mm.
way to be. See, and that's
That's
the
lovely.
thing. Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's why it struck a chord,
Mm,
because it speaks to the universal human wish
mm.
for peace inside their heart and mind, and also in their community and world. So I think it's like that.
The images were so powerful of that walk and how people were
Mhm.
responding, just
I know.
absolutely just overwhelming. And I'd recommend anyone who's listening to the podcast, if you haven't gone online to take a look at those images, I really encourage you to do so because it can be life-changing.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, it reminded me to put down my phone
Mm, mm.
because it creeps into your life.
And or to be intentional about if you are going to pick up your phone, what are you gonna look at? What are you going to listen to? Who are you
Oh,
going to
that's
look
right.
at? And
Oh,
who
yeah,
are
you
you
can
going to
make that
listen
choice.
to? Because
Hmm.
there could be there's some wonderfully inspiring things happening out there.
Oh, yeah.
But we have to the algorithms aren't necessarily going to
No,
take us
they're not.
there.
No, the
Yeah.
algorithm, no. It's not our friend. Yeah,
Yeah.
anything that increases the addictive nature of the media and the devices. It's a sauce.
Not our friend. It's not our
Yeah.
friend.
It's suspect.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, that's fun.
Kathy, this has been a delightful and really meaningful conversation. So thank you. Is there anything else that you would like to share or say as you
Yeah.
reflect on what we've talked about?
Yeah. I think that it's really hard to think about making a change. I think that's the bottom line. It's hard to think about making a change, to change the way we think, the way we do, the stuff we value,
Mhm.
and so forth. But we have to remember that the algorithms are driven by business models that really want our attention, and that the practice of prayer and the practice of meditation, regardless of which religion you subscribe to, all of that is about taking back our attention.
It's an act of defiance, isn't it? It's really an act of
Yeah,
defiance.
yeah, it is. It's saying, no, I'm going to take back my attention and train myself to take my attention back. Because if you look at, let's just use the basic mindfulness meditation that's taught in mindfulness-based stress reduction, for example. That's a secular form of mindfulness. When when we sit in this mindful way and place our attention on an object, I'm going to use the breath as the example, although other objects could be used. By doing that, placing attention on the breath, for example, as it comes in and goes out, that's pretty secular. Everybody breathes.
Mm.
So it's like in breath, out breath. And what you'll find is that you'll have a few moments where you're attentive to the breath. But then something will occur in your mind and you'll be distracted from the breath. And that's actually fine. It's okay. It's not wrong. It's not bad. It's just what human minds do. We're interested in things that move and show us pictures and are exciting. And, we like all that. But the idea then is that our attention has been drawn away. And when we recognize that our attention has been drawn away, we can take a moment, stop, say, I'm thinking, and then make the aspiration and go back to the breath. Just come right on back. Come back
Mm.
to the breath for a fresh start at mindfulness.
Mm.
Just a fresh start, because you in that moment reclaimed your attention. It's back to you now. And so when you do this, you're strengthening the muscles of letting go. And that just goes back to the Buddha's four noble truths. The suffering, the cause being clinging, the solution being letting go, and the path being the way to let go, learning how to let go. So when you're sitting in a mindful way or praying in a mindful way, coming always back to the prayer, you don't come back to your prayer and meditation with judgment. You just come back, because that's all you have to do.
Mm.
And then when you bring yourself back again and again, eventually you get good at noticing the muscles of letting go get stronger, and you can find that you can let go of bigger and bigger and heavier things until you're able to be with a lot of things that you couldn't be with before. So that's what taking back your attention is all about. And if you can do that, then you can begin to put your attention on things like the loving kindness meditation and be present with that. So, it's not just about removing your attention from something, it's about giving your attention to something that's
Mm.
worthwhile. A friend of mine said she said, I became a better prayer person after I learned I
Mm.
learned some mindfulness. She said, now I do it before I do my prayers. So
Wonderful. Kathy, if anyone wants to know more about KTC
mhm.
there and
Yeah.
hear about what you all are up to, where do they go?
No, they can go to www.columbusktc.org, and they'll see our webpage. We even have a webpage called I'm New,
Mm.
and it will tell you what to expect when you arrive at the Buddhist Center, and give you some tips on where the coffee is and some other things like that that are necessary. So hopefully
Wonderful.
that will be useful to folks. We have
Wonderful.
we have no we have free meditation instruction every Sunday, and that's every Sunday at 10 o'clock in the morning. And we also have open meditation in a different room at 10 o'clock in the morning. So yeah, so
Okay.
that's our main public intake.
So, last question for you.
Mhm.
For someone who may not be terribly familiar with Tibetan Buddhism, what is a book that you would recommend?
Okay, well, let's see. Um, I like this one. I think it's a little thick. I'm looking for the skinnier one. I have a skinny. Oh, there's the skinny one. Be right back.
Okay.
She do 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 do. Anyway, yeah. I'd recommend this book because it's skinnier. It's called Excellent at the Beginning. Excellent at the Beginning. And it's by my teacher, Kempo Karthar Rinpoche, and I'll provide you with the spelling, and you can put that in your comments section. And so, excellent at the beginning, I think, is the easiest one because it just talks about the basics of Buddhist meditation, and it also teaches a different form of that compassion meditation. So, I would
Hmm.
pick this one. Yeah,
Okay. Very good.
yeah.
And I think it's worth pointing out too, particularly folks who have been historically associated with the church. So, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but there is a wonderful blending that's possible
Hmm.
between Tibetan Buddhism and other religious traditions, and that one doesn't have to necessarily pick one or the other.
This is
And
correct. This is correct. As my teacher once told a person who was of the Christian persuasion who wanted to practice Buddhist meditation, he said to her, he said, "Look, when you when you get a new friend, you don't have to get rid of your old friends. Now you have two friends." And,
that's a
and
wonderful way to look at that.
yeah, and so yeah, it's like that. It's very much like that. So
Mhm.
yeah, there's nothing that's incompatible, but you also have to recognize that it's going to be a different tradition that is non-theistic, and it's okay because you can learn Buddhist meditation and not become Buddhist.
Mm,
And a lot of people have done that. Lots of people have done that. We
mhm,
get people every week who come and learn meditation, and then we don't see them again, and that's just fine.
mm. Very good. Kathy, thank you again. I am so grateful for this time and your insights and your thoughts. Thank you for that, and many, many blessings to you.
Oh, yeah, and same to you. And I just, I'm so happy that you have this podcast where you can talk about important things. And
Mm,
because we need stuff that's uplifting right now. So thanks for providing that for people. So,
wonderful. All
yeah,
right. Be
thank
well.
you.